he instantly makes you forget that he's the Dalai Lama, or that he's a leader of Tibetans, or a leader of Tibetan Buddhism, and instantly you see somebody who feels like an uncle or a friend that you just haven't met before. And I don't know exactly how he does it, but he makes great eye contact. He usually makes physical contact of some kind, even with somebody he's never met before, and he somehow demystifies himself. When he walks into the White House, the first thing he does is to shake the hands of all the bodyguards and all the waiters in attendance, and actually usually to say, oh, I remember you were here during the Clinton that regime too, or he's got an extraordinarily good memory. And I think when he does that, that's his way of telling our president, well, they're just as important as you or me in some ways. They're as deserving of respect, and I think he's imparting a good lesson to the president in that way, but mostly because the humanity is very, very unforced, and he genuinely is a really modest man. When he says he's a simple Buddhist monk, many years ago I thought, well, maybe that's a rhetorical device, or maybe that's a kind of false modesty, or it's a kind of diplomacy. But no, he really sees himself as a simple Buddhist monk, and he says that when he has dreams, he never sees himself as the Dalai Lama in his dreams, or in his distant memories of previous lives. He only sees himself as a monk, and that's why he calls himself a simple Buddhist monk. As far as he's concerned, that's who he is. He'll go into the White House wearing flip-flops. And one way or another, I think with his bearing, he just has a way of dissolving differences so that people aren't awed by him and won't think of him either as a god or as a devil, but just see him as a fellow human struggling with the same problems that all of us have. And he always stresses when people say, is life easy for you? Or if you had a magic wand, how would you bring peace to the world? He always says, I'm just a human being, as was the Buddha. I have the same difficulties, the same challenges, the same temptations to be angry now and then. And I think when he does that, he's actually giving us hope. Because if you put the Dalai Lama on a pedestal, that's as if to say he's like Michael Jordan and he's doing things that none of us could dream of doing. But what he's always trying to say is, if you think I'm compassionate or clear-sighted, all I'm doing is reflecting back to you what you have inside yourself. So whatever you see in me, you could manifest as much if you want. But humanity is, I think, what strikes one. And of course, he has a wonderful sense of humor, and he does have a sense of mischief, and all that works. He can't look at a male ponytail without tugging it, or a male beard without pulling it. He's fascinated with the hair on the backs of people's hands. And when you see him on stage, he'll be before 15,000 people, he'd be looking around like a kid who's just arrived in a natural history museum. And I think, again, that's a wonderful way of making him seem one of us. I think he almost speaks in his imperfect English for that reason too, because that makes him seem much more accessible than if he were speaking either fluent English or just Tibetan with a translator.
Professor,
I think this lady has the mic, and then maybe the gentleman is...
You're a wonderful speaker, tremendously charismatic. And you're right about the Dalai Lama in so many different ways. I've never heard anyone speak that was able to kind of condense the present in all points in space and time simultaneously, because you're talking about his idea about the past and the future. He exists in all points in time simultaneously. He's like kind of a living exemplar of the lion's roar. But one of the things that's really fabulous that me and my friends always appreciate is the great gift that he gave to everyone here in LA with the Sacred Music Festival. And I'm very curious how much you know about how he planned that, and he continues to give it to us, and it really has helped unify a lot of different kind of cultures here. Everything from local parks, downtown, everybody gets involved. Hundreds of thousands of people. And I'm wondering how he put that in motion, and what other kinds of gifts of that nature he's giving people in other communities around the world, on top of all his preachings.
Yes. Wonderful question too, which I've never heard before, and I'm afraid I don't know the details of the Sacred Music Festival, but I can tell you everywhere he goes in the world, there are musical performances, art exhibitions, all of which he's encouraging, perhaps because they speak to the universal, and again, they bring all cultures together, and each of us is the beneficiary of every other culture. The way it works is that he tells his aides some of the rough areas he wants to promote. I think education would be the first, and the arts would certainly be one of them. And then they respond to each of the invitations on his behalf. But you're right that one of the things he does is whenever he comes into a community, he somehow managed to bring together people who were feuding only 5 minutes before. I was with him traveling across Japan for a week last November, and there were a group of about 15 different Buddhist groups who never talked to one another, but somehow they joined together to invite him to speak to all of them. And as he spoke to all of them, I think what he was really trying to do was to do what you were describing wonderfully that he's done with the Sacred Music Festival. And I know musicians who performed before him, and as I was saying a minute ago, they felt a little daunted to perform before what Tibetans regard as the incarnation of a god. But as soon as he looks over at them or he makes some gesture, they realize that they're essentially at home and they're with friends. But I think, as I say, what I've noticed about his scheduling is that, for example, he's had one day in Tokyo 2 years ago. So Tokyo is the second largest economy in the world, and probably the one country apart from the US that would have the most sway on China. But when he arrived in Tokyo for that one day, he didn't meet a single political leader, and he didn't meet a single businessman, didn't meet the media, he didn't meet any power brokers. He spent the whole day visiting 2 high schools. And he said, these 15-year-old boys, they're the ones who are actually going to be constructing the world. They're much more powerful than me or the Prime Minister or the head of Mitsubishi, and they're also the ones who are open to the world. And he loves going to schools. And the kind of questions he gets from 13-year-olds, he feasts on and then starts using in his teachings the following day. So I'm sorry I don't know more about Sacred Music Festival, but it is true that as he's deciding which of the 6,000 invitations that come to him from Greater Los Angeles to respond to, he's looking for the ones that will ripple out in a non-Buddhist context and touch as many parts as possible. So if there's something that's very sectarian, then he'll stay away from it, and if it's something more global, he'll run towards it.
As an ardent student of Buddhism myself and comparative philosophies, it just occurred to me that I've never really read or heard exactly what Dalai Lama has said about reincarnation. You see, Buddhists have inherited from the Hindus, right? And Buddha himself was silent when he was asked, supposedly, is there life after death? It's just silent. And so it's always an ambivalence about pinpointing reincarnation. I was wondering if you personally have heard him speak about it, or read something what he has written, or really what he says.
These questions are much too good. Thank you very much. And you're absolutely right. I once had a wonderful discussion between 2 of the foremost Buddhist scholars in the West, Robert Thurman and Stephen Batchelor, about whether Buddhism even needs the idea of reincarnation. And also, when I say that the Dalai Lama won't hold to any Buddhist precept that goes against science, reincarnation is the first example that somebody may cite, because there isn't that much scientific evidence. There's one big project at the University of Virginia which claims to have found 2,000 very persuasive cases for reincarnation. But certainly you could say to the Dalai Lama, working in this room, as somebody who only holds to empirically what's been scientifically proven, how do you feel about reincarnation? He's also in a difficult position because he is a reincarnation himself, and that's how he occupies this position. So he does talk freely about his past lives. And he says that there are 2 of the 13 previous Dalai Lamas with whom he does feel a connection, mysterious connection. The others, not necessarily very much. And he also says, well, actually there's no virtue in speculating about my past lives. In the way that he doesn't actually like to talk very much about the past, because he said, that's done with, there's nothing I can do about that, what I want to attend to right now. So if you asked him, he would say he believes in reincarnation because reincarnate lamas are intrinsic to Tibetan Buddhism. But he would also say that's not the most important thing. And one clear and important example of that is that he's 73 years old now. He's not in very good health. And my suspicion is that the next Dalai Lama will not